Hi there, my name's Brendan Sutton and I'm the Sales and Marketing Manager at Viking Roofspec. Today I'm going to be discussing warm roofs. I acknowledge that nearly all of you will be familiar with warm roofs, so I won't spend too much time on the basic differences between warm roofs and traditional cold roofs. However, for the sake of completion, I still think it's important to have a brief recap. Then we'll go through some options of warm roofs available in the market, and lastly I'll be featuring a real champion of the Viking portfolio, which is our WarmSpan system. So what's a warm roof? In simple terms, it's a roofing system that insulates a building from the outside, usually in the form of a rigid foam layer which is waterproofed by a sheet membrane system. In contrast, a cold roof insulates a building from the inside. It has insulation stuffed between the rafters, usually in the form of glass wool type insulation, and a cold roof requires vents to ventilate the ceiling cavity. Warm roof advantages. So with the insulation being continuous and not sliced up into pieces to fit between the rafters, you have an uninterrupted thermal cover. With the insulation protecting the substrate from the external temperatures, rising moist air from inside the building has no cold underside of the substrate to convert it to condensation. So the dew point finds itself on the membrane surface on the outside of the building. Warm roofs using polyisocyanurate foam board for insulation have the highest thermal efficiency per measurement of thickness compared with other insulation materials. The removal of condensation on the interior makes for a healthier building, and unlike a number of insulation materials, especially wool type ones, polyisocyanurate board loses hardly any of its thermal efficiency over the life of the product. So let's look at some warm roof options in the market, and we'll start with the everything but the kitchen sink, complete bells and whistles warm roof. So looking at this one, we start off with a sheet waterproofing membrane, which is protecting the rest of the warm roof, which is anchored with mechanical fastenings and plates going through the top layer, which is a rigid cover board, protecting the foam insulation below that. Then there's a sound barrier below that, a vapor barrier below that, and then of course there's the substrate, which in this instance is a steel tray. So at the other end of the warm roof complexity spectrum is the fundamental assembly. So this is simply a substrate, rigid foam, and then a layer of waterproofing membrane to protect it. In New Zealand's Climate Zone 3, which is the South Island and the North Island's volcanic plateau, a vapor barrier between the substrate and that rigid foam is required as well. However, a vapor barrier can be used anywhere throughout the country. Steel skin sandwich panel assemblies are simply profiled foam sandwich between profiled steel skins. So for which situations would these warm roof options typically be best suited? So we'll start with the full bells and whistles assembly. Now this kind of roof is useful for buildings with very specific requirements, especially in the area of acoustics, for example, theatres and concert halls and the like. So a sound insulation layer to add to the acoustic properties of the thermal board is a must. Other buildings may possess a disproportionate amount of plant on the roof, which is not only noisy while functioning, but such machinery imposes heavy point loads on the roof assembly. And these roofs can have a lot more foot traffic in the form of maintenance staff than normal buildings. In these situations, high density cover boards add more compressive strength and protect the foam below it. Interestingly, the fundamental warm roof assembly will work perfectly for almost every commercial or residential situation, provided the insulation layer has very good compressive strength, and I'll elaborate further on this later on. In terms of sandwich panel product, as a gross generalization, sandwich panel roofing is ideal for larger ice cream container like commercial buildings, especially those where the control of condensation and indoor temperature is the number one priority and needs to be exact. So classic examples will be food storage warehouses and cool stores and the like. In my technical presentation about re-roofing, I actually mentioned that a warm roof overlay on an existing roof can be the perfect solution to extend its life for another 20 or so years. In this last section, I'm going to feature one of the heroes of Viking's portfolio, and that's our Viking WarmSpan system. Viking WarmSpan falls into the category mentioned earlier, the fundamental category. It is just the critical components required for a successful warm roof installation and no more. There's a steel tray substrate on top of which polyiso insulation board is bonded, and lastly, a Viking waterproofing membrane completes the external layer. And as mentioned, for climate zone 3 or anywhere if requested, a vapor barrier can be used as well. So what's so special about WarmSpan? Firstly, simplicity. It possesses just those critical integral components required for a successful installation without imposing unnecessary extra layers, or to use the analogy of Coke and fries, which is superfluous to requirements and add avoidable extra cost. It's a versatile system as well. So in the event that the building has some specific needs, for example, it might be an observatory with telescopes on the roof, which will end up receiving more foot traffic than a normal roof. Then rigid coverboards could be installed under allocated walkways, directing people down a predetermined path that may take up less than 5% of the roof area, as opposed to installing a coverboard on 100% of that roof area, which would add tons of weight to the building at a lot of extra cost and at no extra value. The WarmSpan system was engineered, rigorously tested, and certified accordingly as being code compliant by reputable engineers, Home Solutions. One of the biggest advantages of WarmSpan is that it has a specialized two-part urethane adhesive which bonds the insulation board to the steel tray, as opposed to using thousands of screws and washers which puncture the layers below and promote thermal bridging from the building's interior. WarmSpan is certified as possessing wind uplift resistance of up to 6.5 kPa. And its substrate renders a saving in structural costs of up to 60% when compared to a traditional plywood roof, which supports at 400 millimeter centers. Now that's when using the maximum spanability. Now this spanability of 3.6 meters, certified by Home Solutions, and we're talking about some serious testing here for the likes of snow loading. Now this is the industry's largest spanability for roofs of this type. In terms of the sequence of construction, the installation of the steel tray provides a very convenient form of instant protection for the building structure and the interior. It's also able to be instantly dried off when wet so that foam board can be installed immediately. Now, in contrast, wet plywood can be a real problem in this regard. If a vapor barrier option is preferred, then there are two vapor barriers options that can be used. There's a tape and sealant system to deal with the steel tray edge junctions, or there's the full cover self-adhered sheet installed on the top of the tray. WarmSpan is the most energy efficient warm roof system of its kind, not only due to the Kingspan polyiso board, which has a very high R value per measurement of thickness, but as mentioned, the absence of screws and plates negates that thermal bridging. WarmSpan has been tested and certified as having the best possible fire resistance rating in the industry, and this is called a Group 1S certificate. So this means that there is actually no need for a ceiling to be hung below the steel tray. So usually ceilings are hung below them, but what this means is that it's just adding pure contingency from a fire resistance perspective. So that has to be reassuring. WarmSpan can also be waterproofed with our EnviroClad, our EpiClad wide sheet adhered membrane systems, or with our Viking 2-layer torch-on membrane system. And lastly, a key feature of WarmSpan is its track record, or in more technical terms, its history in use. Over the last decade, it's been installed on hundreds of buildings, which continue to stand up to New Zealand's harsh conditions. So over the last 10 minutes or so, we've covered the basic differences between warm and cold roofs. I've talked about the key options available in the market and where they may be best utilised. And lastly, I've featured our WarmSpan system, which demonstrates our philosophy that simple, robust, and energy efficient is more beneficial than convoluted, highly tricked, and unnecessarily costly. So I hope you found that useful. For more information, please contact us by phone or by email, and thanks for watching.